Hi there, short film fans, and welcome to another episode of the Cameo Launch Short Film Podcast. Joining me today is a very special guest. He is a producer, director, writer. He's an Academy Award winner. You've seen some of his work before if you've been familiar with our platform through our review of his film, The Silent Child. But joining us to talk about his new film, In Too Deep, is director Chris Overton. Chris, thank you so much for joining us today. How have you been?
Very well, thank you, and thanks so much for having me on. I think this is just such a brilliant platform. So yeah, it's great to be here.
Oh, it's great to have you, and thank you for taking the time to speak to us. And congratulations on your new film, In Too Deep. We managed to catch it at the Nexus Midlands showcase a few weeks back, and it was just fantastic. And congratulations on your overall win there as well.
Yeah, I think that was only our second public screening, so to kind of win, the grand prize and the Audience Choice Awards. Obviously, it's always nice to get those awards, but especially early on in a festival run, it kind of it gives you a bit of confidence that what you've made is worth watching. So yeah. Thanks for. I know you're one of the judges on that, so yeah. Thanks for. If you had any involvement in that, Nigel.
No, it was kind of a double-edged sword with that one because the lineup of films was so amazing. You know, you kind of had to pick your favorite out of just a fantastic bunch of films. But even in that crowd, In Too Deep really stands out. For anyone who hasn't seen it and isn't familiar with it, can you just give us a bit of an overview as to the premise of the film, what it's about, and some of its underlying themes?
Sure. In Too Deep is a story of two parents dealing with grief very differently. And one deals with it in a more conventional way, the mother, Carol, and Ben, the father, deals with it in a completely abnormal, destructive way. And I'll just say that it does involve AI technology, so very timely at the moment.
Very much so. Very much so. I liked the way it kind of fused some very topical, broad sort of tech-focused themes with something that is very natural and very relatable, and something that sadly a lot of people are very familiar with, which is the process of grief, with the sort of added sort of bitterness about it being about parents having lost a child. And there were a lot of sort of heavy emotional elements to the experience of the film from that perspective. But then it kind of turns in a direction and starts to weave in these elements of AI. I won't go into a massive amount of detail in terms of how the AI plays into the story, but it doesn't seem jarring, even though they're two very different things, if that makes sense. The way that the story fuses them, I think, is done really, really well. Obviously through the script, but also through the tonal and visual storytelling that you employ as a director, just kind of weaving in the sort of visual markers of a mystery, but also of a relatable emotional journey as well. What were some of the sort of core ideas you had in terms of how to approach the story and how to merge those two very different themes?
Yeah, well, thank you for all the kind words about that. I think, you're right. We wanted to kind of weave in this, bizarre AI tech into a human story. So I guess a lot of the ideas were formed around that. I mean, just in general, I'm a big fan of, beautiful cinematography, and I think there's a lot of that in there, and visual storytelling. And I think one of the main things I tried to do was create like a frame within a frame, and you'll see, even from the trailer, like that Ben, the father, is scanning pictures. So this kind of although we shot it in anamorphic, there's a lot of things that are like shot through a frame within a frame. So there's a lot of squares within this picture. So that was quite a visual theme throughout.
You do remember it, and it does stick with you just through sort of some of the more unusual approaches. I mean, obviously, it's really well shot, and the performances in it are fantastic. There's the cast and crew do a fantastic job. But there are little things like, as you mentioned, the scanning of the pictures. But one of the first images that really sticks out to you is you see these family pictures of the child's face cut out, and obviously that gives you a bit of a hint as to what's to come in terms of the AI aspect of things, but also it as a kind of visual message. It speaks to the way that the father is dealing with the loss as well, in that he's trying to rip that pain out. He doesn't want to look that pain in the face, if that makes sense. You've kind of got a really strong visual representation of the fact that he is not dealing with it in necessarily the best way. How deep into that kind of emotional motivation did you have to go with the actors, one of which being Rachel Shenton, your wife and producer of the film? But how deep did you have to go in terms of how you wanted to approach that, and where each character was in terms of dealing with grief as a whole? What were sort of the points of reference that you used with the actors for that?
Yeah, we actually went quite deep actually with grief, but just slightly going back about it's interesting you mentioned like the squares and the cutout of the child in the family photo. I think that's one of the first visual images when I was reading the writer James Spillman, his script. That was such a strong visual image in my head. As you read it, you can really imagine that, and I think that stands out as something quite shocking, and we start like a steady cam shot and track back, and then you reveal more and more photos of all these family photos with a square and a face missing. So bringing it back to the grief, Stephen Wight, who's he's probably best known for I May Destroy You. He plays like one of the flatmates, and yeah, like we did go quite far. We worked with Child Bereavement UK, and they were so helpful in terms of their resources. And we kind of actually set up like a counselling session as them as actors, and kind of went deep into how they can pull upon their own lives to kind of relate to what's going on. And Rachel lost her father when she was 14, so it was kind of like the role reversal for her. Like it was, and I think she found that hugely helpful, because she was like, oh, okay, I understand. It's a similar type of grief, but just in a kind of reversed type of way. So she lost a parent, not a child. But it was, there's a lot of similar things that someone has to deal with when they lose a parent or if they lose a child. So it was, yeah, hugely helpful. So massively grateful to Child Bereavement UK. I think working with a charity on any film, if you've got a message, I think that's one of the first things we always try and do, to make sure that we're doing it authentically. Pretty much in everything we've ever done, we would try and work with a charity, or make sure that side of it's really spot on.
In what ways do they work with you, just in terms of accuracy, or are there ways of guiding you through a particular process, or relating the experience to an audience? How do some of these charities work with you?
Yeah, a bit of both, Nigel, because they can look through the script and they can say, oh, actually, that bit's done really well, and you've got confidence in knowing that what you're going to shoot is working well. Or they could say, actually, I think this might happen slightly differently. So it can be quite early on, like, even before I start doing my shot list, having that kind of knowledge was really, really helpful. And so they guide that, they give the actors some research and some background. I myself, like, I haven't directly lost someone, but my brother lost a child. So that it's just they're kind of helping you guide how you can connect to that story. And I think a lot of people we worked with on set actually were able to relate to it. And it's a heavy topic, isn't it?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it's quite common. Grief is quite common, and I think it's quite a common theme. So it's nice. I think I'm quite proud that we've made a film about grief that represents grief very well, but it's got this massive twist. So it's not
Yeah.
just a film about grief, you know?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And through that, you kind of bring a topic to the fore that is becoming quite prevalent now, that being AI. What I find interesting about the topic of grief is that even though it happens to just about all of us at some point, um, we feel very alone when we're experiencing it. It's relatable, but it's also quite isolating. Um, that can be a topic all by itself. But what were some of the conversations you had, um, director to writer, about the merging of those themes and why those two themes were merged and how one informs the other?
I think James's main motivation was that he wanted to explore this human story mixed with this technology, and to kind of show how far people might go to bring back a memory. Um, and I think that's quite interesting. James Spillman, the writer as well, is also an incredible VFX artist. So to have his backing, when you read a script like this, you go, okay, well, who's going to look after that part? This is a short film. We don't have, we're not able to do this, this, and this. So that was nice to know. It was very comforting to know that someone knows this world very well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And also, you've got the added sort of comfort that a person can write with some authority on that particular topic, but also they can kind of, while James isn't a producer per se, on that level, he can kind of apply a bit of a producer's brain to it in terms of what will be possible for the production. And what you can actually make work. So that's a big asset to the film, and it works really, really well because the VFX, when they're used, don't really stand out in a jarring way, and it all kind of serves to serve the story and its themes and where it ultimately leaves the audience. With short film being quite restrictive in terms of the amount of resources you can plow into it, what were some of the biggest challenges you had in terms of how far you wanted to go with the story or what you wanted to include, and where did you have to compromise, and where did you find yourself kind of going, okay, well,
Yeah.
we were able to actually achieve that?
Well, yeah, I mean, in terms of VFX, that's one area that I didn't feel like we actually had to compromise. All it's known, isn't it, for being very expensive, and it is. So we were so lucky, and I think without James and his VFX knowledge and his contacts to that world, I don't think we would have been able to achieve any of the VFX really because of the restrictions on budget. It's the number one thing I think that stops people from making a short is budget. So, and believe me when I say it, like everything that could have gone wrong with this film went wrong with this film.
Right.
It really did. Like we were a huge victim of COVID. I'm talking like the day before we were going to shoot, there was a big announcement, and we were like, well, are we allowed to do this? Are we not? So everything was restricted, and then we had to delay like by 3 months, and then there was another. It was like the second wave, and then we went from like having the whole shoot booked in I think February 2021, and then it was like, no, sorry, you can't do that. So we had to get all the some really nice shots in the snow and in the wintertime, but we knew that we had to get that in that window. So they allowed us to, with very strict rules, have 6 people on set. And so we were working with a massive crane. We were like in -10 degrees. We kind of trekked up to this like mini mountain to get this establishing shot. It was like the worst conditions I've probably ever shot in. And then we had to delay the entire filming for 9 months after that. So we got one day here, we got another day there, and then we had another 6 or 7 days to do the rest of the shoot. And Stephen Wight and Rachel are, very successful actors, and we had to work around their schedules. So I was just like, oh, you just want to get it done.
Get it in,
So
yeah.
it was like a really long process just because of COVID and timing. So yeah, everything that could have gone wrong in terms of scheduling and stuff like that. It was a nightmare, and then we had great deals with post production houses and kit houses, and after COVID, all of that went out the window. So
Oh, right.
it's really difficult. We got these deals, and then afterwards they were like, "Oh, sorry, everybody's waiting to film. We've got this backlog,"
Yeah.
and they're like, "We can't offer you that deal anymore." So it was like, "Oh
Oh,
my god, what are we
wow.
going to do?" So it was stressful. So
Yeah.
to be at Nexus and to screen the film and to kind of get those awards, it did mean a lot, because you kind of you go through this process and you do kind of kill yourself, and the rest of the team did. So yeah, that was a nice way to kind of start the festival journey, I
Oh,
guess.
that's brilliant. Well, obviously not brilliant that you had to go through all of that, but ultimately the process had a happy ending. You guys came out of it with an absolutely amazing film, and I think people are going to recognise that as it goes through its festival journey. So best of luck on that front. How did it compare? Obviously, you didn't have COVID to deal with, shooting Silent Child, but how did it compare in terms of a logistical exercise to something like Silent Child? Because Silent Child was quite a big production as well.
Yeah,
So yeah, how did the two compare on that front?
I think the difference really was Silent Child was our first film, so we we weren't as experienced. So when all these things were popping up, we would just deal with them then. Like, whereas being more experienced, knowing that this was about to happen, these mistakes or these problems were going to come up, it was almost like a blessing in disguise that our lack of experience on the Silent Child, having being our first film, there was a bit of a beauty in that, because we just
Right.
kind of plowed through and didn't. I don't know. There's something in that. I think there's something, a mentality that you get with first time filmmakers. They kind of, I mean, I'm speaking for myself, but like, I didn't know what could go wrong, so I broke the rules. Do you know what I mean? I didn't know the rules, so I broke them anyway. And I don't know, I can't articulate it, but there's this. You have a different approach to a film when you don't know what can go wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you were to go to any filmmaker who's struggling to put out short film after short film and kind of make their way um, along a filmmaker's journey, if you were to tell them A, how difficult it was going to be, B, how much it's going to cost them personally and financially, and C, how few opportunities there are to actually make a living through this road, I think a lot of them will probably not do it if they knew ahead of time. But once you're kind of plowing down that road, you kind of deal with those problems as they occur, and your mind finds a way around them. And as a result, you get some amazing stories on screen and off screen. Um, but that being the case, that kind of leads us nicely into talking about your journey as a filmmaker and how you got started and how that eventually resulted in the formation of Slick Films, or your involvement with Slick Films. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you got into filmmaking and what kind of started you on that road and what keeps you on it?
Yeah, I do think for me there was an exact moment where I fell in love with film. I remember I was like 13 and we were doing a school project. We were like dressed in war costumes with a little handy cam. But it wasn't until we got into the edit and I saw how these clips can be, manipulated and put together, and you can use transitions and stuff like that. I was just like, oh my God, wow,
Mm.
this is incredible. And from then, like, I asked my mum, like, begged my mum, and actually told a bit of a white lie and said we had to have a camera for school for media studies. And
All
she's like,
right.
"It's your birthday," and money was tight for my parents, but I think I managed to kind of persuade them that it was a good idea, and my mum probably thought it would give her a bit of a break. Annoying us. So anyway, I got this camera, and that's it. I just didn't look back. Every weekend, I would kind of rally the neighbourhood kids, and we would make films every weekend. And I made I guess I made a short film which will never see the light of day. It was called Get Back, and it was about bullying. And I was about 13 or 14, and I was an actor at the time on Roman Polanski's Oliver Twist. I was playing Noah Claypole. So I was using because we filmed in Prague, so I was using like the sets and the airport and the car journeys as part of the story, and I would just film everything on my own or get my mom to film certain things. So yeah, I would just that's where I fell in love with film, and then I kind of went off to college and picked everything back up again when I launched Slick, and it was initially started as a showreel company, and it was called Slick Showreels. And then it evolved quite quickly into us filming. We were editing people's showreels, and then we started to film showreels. And for a good 5 years, I filming showreels every day. You know, we were very busy. The business kind of took off, and the purpose really at that point was for me to, although I loved film, I guess it was more to support an acting career because I was an actor initially. And then I think the more I started to do it, the more I fell in love with film and what went on behind the camera, as opposed to being in front of the camera. So they've kind of when it kind of changed, and then I would say I became a director when I read The Silent Child. If I'm being completely honest, that
Oh,
script
okay.
made me because I enjoy. I did a bit of everything, bit of sound, bit of cinematography, do a bit of directing, and write a few scripts here and there. Don't class myself as a writer at all. Um, but then when I read The Silent Child, I was like, oh god, this film has to be made. It was about telling that story as opposed to anything else, and it really, kind of for the first time, probably in my life, had this real fire in my belly to tell this story. It just seemed like we had to do it. There was no option.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, that kind of obviously went very well. We went on to win the Academy Award, which was, you could probably have a whole other conversation about the journey of that. And after that, I think we wanted to. We went on a very unique experience as first time filmmakers, from an idea in Rachel's head to the Oscar stage and beyond. We learned a lot. We learned a lot of amazing things, and not all good, but I think you learn more from the mistakes you make than the achievements. So we have this very well-rounded experience, and we wanted to kind of help other filmmakers. We could tell there was a need. There was a lot of people that had amazing stories but didn't have the confidence to write them down. And I think we were very encouraging, and it just kind of snowballed really. I think people were constantly coming to us saying, can you help me make this film? Or, we've got this idea for a story. And so, you know, a few years after that, we've got now a slate of about, with Silent Child being number one, we've got about 38 films now, short films. A lot of them are obviously at different stages. We've got a lot of them in development, some in pre-production, some in post-production, some on the festival circuit, and then some, of course, being distributed. So all at varying levels, but it's kind of the dream, really, to kind of make this short film studio and then keep that going like the showreels have kept going. And then we want to do the same with feature films. We want to create a ladder into the film industry for people, and we want to be the example. I guess I started from showreels, went to shorts, and I hope to go to features. And I kind of want to hopefully inspire people to see that, you can come from a working class background, and that path is doable. It is possible
Yeah.
if you work hard. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I find the whole process fascinating, to be honest with you, because you start off just kind of doing a bit of a school project, and you hit an exact moment where it kind of ignites an inner fire in you. But that doesn't automatically lead to, right, I'm going to make the greatest film ever made. You kind of focus that on a very practical path, because as you mentioned, you started off as acting, so there was clearly something creative that drove you, but you were also quite practical in the way that you approached film, in that you started with doing show reels and so on and so forth. um, did you meet Rachel doing through acting. Is that how the two of you
Yeah,
initially met?
yeah. So
Okay.
we met on a TV show that we were doing together at the time, and then kept in touch with the occasional text. And then 5 years later, I was out trying to be an actor, doing pilot season in LA, and she was filming a show called Switched at Birth, and she helped me with a self tape. I just couldn't get it done. I asked a few friends, and I tried, and I was just, it's one of those things that I had to do, and I just couldn't get through it. It was like a confidence thing, but she was the one that like really helped me. So we after that I kind of took her out for sushi, and the rest was history, really.
All right, lovely.
um, so yeah, um, we kind of reconnected in LA, and then it was about a year or so after that. She was like, "I've got this idea for a film," and she told me about it, and it was based on the lady she was living with in LA at the time, who was profoundly deaf. It was kind of about her life, and I just said, "Oh my God, that sounds like the most amazing thing I've ever heard. You have to write that down." So she did. And then we kind of, developed that a little bit together, and then just started to build it slowly,
Yeah.
and and then yeah, it went on this incredible journey, and not kind of two separate journeys. Yes, the film festival circuit, and then leading to an Oscar, but also it has been a catalyst for real change in the deaf community as well. The BSL sign language bill has now been passed recently, and I know a lot of outside people say the Silent Child was a huge catalyst for that happening. Um, and I think it definitely raised the profile of deaf awareness. So and it was spoke about in the Houses of Parliament. It was screened at the United Nations. So there's this whole other side of it that was making real change as well. So
That's amazing.
for Slick Films, we try to. It's a big statement, but we try and change the world through film,
Mm.
even if that's a little bit. But it can happen. Short film can
Yeah,
be exceptionally powerful, and
absolutely.
obviously it takes so many little things to go well and to go right. But actually, if you do get it right, change can happen, and
Mm.
that's exciting.
Absolutely, and you see that in short film, ironically through the Academy Awards quite a bit. Um, Girl in the River by Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy being one example, actually had an impact on um, policy and law in Pakistan. With what I find really interesting about your journey and Rachel's journey and Slick Films formation as a whole is that you were kind of in a position to pursue those loftier goals after having kind of established something a lot more practical and thought through. But it was really something that was personally important that kind of drove you to those higher heights, which in turn has fed um, the more practical end of Slick Films. Obviously, you were part of a campaign highlighting issues around sickle cell as well. Can you talk to us a little bit about that, the Code campaign that you're involved with?
Yeah, I think that was through Havas Life Medicom. So they're in the pharmaceutical industry, and they're an agency, and they create content for pharmaceutical companies. And we had a good relationship with them. We did another project that I directed called Wolf Day at the Office, which was about how dogs can detect cancer. So that was just a relationship we have there, and they kind of came back to us through sickle cell and creating this campaign around that. And I'll be completely honest, I didn't know, um, I didn't know about it. I didn't know too much about the effects of that, and they're
Mm.
just devastating. So it's something that really aligned with the type of work that we wanted to do. So yeah, very proud to be doing anything like that. And I think it's a little bit more rare when it's through, if there's a commercial edge to it, those kind of campaigns aren't happening all the time. So when they do and we're involved with them, it's exciting.
And what I really really love is that even if it's campaign work or via an agency or anything like that, it still has a very personal edge to your work style has a very personal edge to it, and that has kind of fed into the films that Slick Films has made. whether you've directed them or not. We spoke just before we started recording that just this past weekend I was able to watch The Morning Bird, and that was just fantastic. It was so, yeah, it was just so visceral in terms of the sort of emotional impact of it, but also so gently done. And you're taking a lot of those practical experiences and the lessons learned through more difficult productions, and as you mentioned before, having to work through COVID, and just applying it to something that's so very, very personal and again relatable. And yeah, we'll talk about hopefully talk about The Morning Bird in a bit more detail at some future point. But the fact that films like that exist, and the fact that you've got more in the pipeline, I think Slick Films is one of the great success stories of the short film medium for me.
Well,
So
thank you so much.
if things were to kind of progress into feature film for you, what's the likelihood that you'd continue with short film?
Without a doubt, I'm not letting short film go. It's so powerful. In the set, we spoke earlier about the show reels, and there's this. It's almost like a business within a business, but we have show reels, short films, and features. That's the dream, and maybe somewhere TV will slot into that as well. But short film's so important. I think without short film, I don't know how I would have broken into the industry. You know, I just think it's important for filmmakers to break into the industry, but also it's important for stories. They're an art form in themselves, short films. So I will never, and I'd never want to let short films go from Slick Films. I think you have to remember where you started. We started with short
Absolutely.
film, and yes, we will go on to bigger things. And I think I think someone will manage that and be kind of like head of short film, and I will be able to oversee it and get involved with the odd project that I'm really passionate about personally. Um, but yeah, it is exciting to tell longer form stories as well and explore all avenues of the industry. We haven't made a feature yet, and we're looking forward to doing that.
Absolutely. And as an experience for audiences as well, um, do you think short film is in a position now to really make itself heard or seen um, at say within the cinema landscape, for example? I mean, with the main outlet for it is still online, and that generally tends to be where a lot of short film gets seen. But just kind of looking at the types of audiences and size of audiences that are engaging with different types of short films and different short film platforms. Um, do you think that there is an opportunity now for people making short film to think cinematically in terms of um, whether whether their film gets seen, and to have that in mind as they're actually making it?
I think it's difficult, but not impossible. And I think a lot of short films, it's the length, isn't it? I think it's a good thing that attention spans are getting shorter and shorter. I do think like the best time for short film is at the moment. It's competitive. There's a lot of people out there doing it. There's so many film festivals. There's so many filmmakers making short films. Um, but yeah, a lot of people need content and short form content. If you're on the tube or you've got a short journey and you want to watch a short film, or even at night, like if you want to just watch something that's 20, 25 minutes, then you kind of have the option now. And it's nice to see Amazon and Netflix, like the big players, embracing short film. I think in a cinema setting, if you're talking about that, I think that's quite hard to just sell a ticket for a solo short film if it's less than 20 minutes, even if it's less
Yeah,
than 50. It's hard, but like if it's together as a program, like, the Oscar shorts every year are in cinemas. I don't
yeah,
think many
exactly.
people know about that, but like, as a program. But I think, yeah, it's probably I think, in my personal opinion, it's probably the best time to find a home for a short film.
Mm, mm. Yeah, I mean, because with say the track record of Slick Films, you guys are in a position now where if you felt it was a good idea, or if you wanted to, you could put together a selection of shorts that can fill a feature film slot in a cinema. And the standard to which they're made, me personally, I think it'd feel right at home on a cinema screen. And you're working with, I think you've got a film coming up. One of the films that's in development is the Saturday After. I think you've got Paul
Yes,
Holbrook attached to direct that one. So he's been
that's
on the
right.
podcast quite a few times as well.
Yeah, brilliant filmmaker. Yeah,
He's amazing. And his films are the kind of films that beg to be seen on the biggest screen possible.
yeah.
And being able to see collaborations between you guys is massively exciting, and the prospect of being able to see something like that in a cinema, I think, is fantastic. So my question, I guess, is, with people making films like that, or people out there doing that kind of work, is cinema a consideration when you're looking at kind of merging your platform and his to that extent in terms of the kinds of projects you're looking at in the future?
I mean, it's a good point you make. You're right. We could put together a feature length version of a short film program. Now we definitely could. I guess when you think of cinema and short film, you think festivals. You want it to have a good festival run. Some of the screenings that I've seen of our own work on a cinema screen as part of a festival is just incredible. The audience is there. I think back to our opening night, the first ever public screening of The Silent Child was to 2,200 people. I mean,
Wow.
very lucky, of course, but like those are the opportunities that are out there, and it was the most incredible experience. SCAD Savannah Film Festival as well. That was another memorable one. These festivals pack out a cinema, and you can enjoy the experience of seeing your film watched by a massive audience. There are the flip side as well. You go to some festivals and like your world premiere could be to 5 people in a room on a small projector. Like there's this, it's so cinema can mean a lot of different things at a film festival. But yeah, I don't know. I think that that's quite an exciting prospect. Really, it's the drive and the finances behind marketing that, which I think
Mm.
are there's a
It's a
lack
great
of
limiting step,
resources for
really,
that.
isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so. It's difficult. It's difficult.
Mm, mm.
Yeah.
And in terms of, because obviously the alternatives to that is online, and that's obviously what a lot of people opt for. But what are some of the biggest challenges you find in terms of finding an online audience, especially with the volume of content that is out there, the amount of people making film? How is it that you're able to draw people to the individual stories that get told via Slick Films, or to your film specifically? And what are some of the biggest challenges in getting those audiences?
Yeah, I think it is. There are lots of short film distributors out there, and I'll be honest, we've kind of had a really good relationship, and do have a really good relationship with one of them, which is Network Island Television, who are just absolutely fantastic. But they're honest, and they're not able to take on every single film that we make because they're always looking for different films. So for us, we're at the stage where like there's a couple that we want to find homes for online,
Mm,
and we've got to reach out to new distributors. But yeah, I'd highly recommend Network Island Television. Derry and Cy from that company are just brilliant. They're really small, but they care about the films. So we've been
mm,
extremely lucky to have a great relationship with them. And they, the films go to VOD platforms, on airlines, things that we would have even considered. And they have built relationships over like I don't know 30 years with their
right.
contacts. So, and that's what you're looking for if you're a filmmaker and there's a distributor with a wealth of experience and contacts in distribution for short films, then it's definitely worth paying a commission to them to get it out there. And Network Island Television aren't the only short film distribution company. I'm sure there's lots of others that exist and are able to kind of help people get their films out there, because that's ultimately what we want, isn't it? We want our work to be seen by as many people as possible. So everyone would dream for their short to be on Netflix, because I think that's the largest audience online.
Yeah.
You know, um, so yeah, I don't know. Like it's something that we're continuing to learn about, really.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, there are a number of distributors that we've dealt with, and distributors that other filmmakers we've spoken to have dealt with. Relationships with distributors, however, isn't something that comes up in a lot of the conversations we've had. Is that something that is, to your experience at least, something that is a common enough occurrence in somebody's kind of filmmaking plans when committing to short film, or does it generally tend to be something that someone shoots for if they're really going to push the boat out, but generally tend to get onto the film festival circuit and then release it onto YouTube or Vimeo when they're done? How common is discussions around short film distributors among the filmmakers that you've spoken to?
Yeah, I think it is more common if a short film is hugely successful. I think our relationship with Network Island began because we were nominated for an Oscar. We had our email inbox was full with distributors wanting to acquire the rights for The Silent Child. Before it became 5 nominees, it was a shortlist of 10. I think it's now 15 that they shortlist. And anyone who's been in that position will tell you that your email inbox overnight just goes crazy with
Right. Yeah.
distributors saying, can we have a meeting with you? And they want to acquire the rights for your film, because I think that's a level of you've taken your film to a level where it makes their job very easy to sell. I think
Yeah.
it doesn't matter almost. I might be wrong. I'm not a distributor, but I think no matter how good a film is, a short film is, I think if it hasn't gone on that festival journey, what can they say about it other than it's a great film? I mean, I think they have to the festival laurels and the success of a festival run. It's a tool for the distributor to say, oh, it's won this, it's been in this festival, it's been nominated for this. That gives them ammunition to sell. I think, and that's what I've seen with ours. The ones that have done really well at festivals, like really well, won lots of awards, been in big festivals. They're the ones that are easier to to sell to a distributor.
That kind of being, I wouldn't, whether or not you call it a holy grail or not, but with that being a potential avenue for taking a short film project to a next level, what do you think are some of the biggest barriers for filmmakers, either filmmakers just starting out or filmmakers who are trying to move on from project 2 to project 3 or 3 to 4? What are some of the biggest challenges for them in terms of getting their film into those festivals where they can kind of create that collection of laurels and get noticed and potentially nominated, or and B, even once they are nominated or shortlisted, um, actually getting in front of a distributor or somebody who can recommend them to someone that can move their career up to that next level?
Yeah, I think budget comes into it massively. I think, especially if you're a first-time filmmaker, which is why I feel like we can offer a lot of value to a first-time filmmaker and someone who's perhaps made a couple of films but not really had a, a vast festival experience. I think it needs to be planned out right at the beginning, but it's the first cost to go. Along with behind the scenes content, when you see that line in the budget and it's like, oh, we don't have enough money to make that, that's gone.
Right,
Festival submissions, £1,000. Well, we can deal with that later. You know what I mean? It's like,
right,
so, but when you come to finish a film, like, it's no good just having this film with if you can't do anything with it, and it is difficult because you do just want to make the film. But I think there's this huge gap between when you finish the film to where you first screen it, like your world premiere, and that can sometimes be 6-7 months. If you finish the film and then start applying for festivals, you might not get a screening for 6 to 8 months, maybe longer. I don't know.
right.
So what do you do? How do you fill that time? I feel very passionately about this, to be honest, and I think a film is like a piece of stock. You got to keep that stock high. I think you've got to shout from the rooftops about that film. And like, if you haven't done any behind the scenes pictures or video, it's very difficult. But like, you can still do something. You can still do some interviews. You can set up a camera at home, for very little with very little resources, and just speak about the film, get the director, see if the actors might come back and talk to you about it, and then you can use clips from the trailer to paint the interviews, or pictures that are screenshots if you didn't. I'm just thinking worst case scenario if you didn't get any behind the scenes content. So we encourage all of our films at Slick to make sure they have behind the scenes content, and we help them with that, because it fills that gap. And I think when you fill that gap and you start to, bang the drum loud enough, that definitely helps, because I think people and festivals are so overwhelmed with submissions that they might need to hear about the name of your film 10 times before they actually take notice of it, like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, I've heard about that. So that's what we believe in. Maybe we're wrong. I don't know. But I feel very strongly that it's, you've just got to, you can't rely on one Facebook post for that person at that festival to see that, like it. And even if they do, does that connect the dots? You've got to go so hard on that, I think. Yeah. So that's my strong view. I didn't sit on the fence there, obviously, Nigel, as you can tell.
I completely agree with all of that. The process of getting something made can be so intensive and all encompassing that it's difficult to not lose track of what the next step is. And you make a great point about the importance of having behind the scenes material, of being able to keep the conversation going about the film before it gets its next screening or gets onto the festival circuit. It's one of the reasons why Cameo Launch exists, is because so many great films fall through the cracks for precisely that reason, is that there's just not enough chatter about some truly great pieces of work. Sometimes we go back a few years to stuff, it's done its festival run, but we feel it's necessary to shout about some of these films because a lot of people might not know about them. But yeah, you're absolutely right in that a lot of the win can come out of the sales of a really good short film, because there's no one really talking about it. Hopefully, we can create a bit more of an ecosystem where people know where to go to hear about great short films or to speak directly to filmmakers. And you taking the time out to have conversations like this is really important, and we're very, very grateful for it as well. Some of the experiences that you've had have been massively insightful to people who are not just first time filmmakers, but people that have been doing it for years. So that being the case, as you're kind of moving forward, what are some of the next steps for In Too Deep? Where can people see it? Do you have any screenings for it planned, either at festivals or through your own events?
Yeah, so it's actually screening in a film festival in Spain. So if there's any Spanish listeners here, I need to find out exactly where that is, but I think it might be Barcelona. And then we just got into the Woods Hole Film Festival in Massachusetts, which has been, I think it's been running for about 32 years. So we're very excited for that. So it's still, it's on its journey, and it's at the beginning of its journey. So we're excited to see where it goes. I want a really nice screening, perhaps in London. So some people that worked on the film, so a lot of people from the Midlands worked on the film. We've kind of had that screening. I'd love a screening in London, so we can invite people there. So it's just about getting it out there and doing things like this. I really enjoy talking about the experience, and if my words offer any advice or inspiration to other filmmakers, then great, because I get very inspired by listening to other podcasts or listening to other filmmakers and interviews. So yeah, it's nice to be involved in that and do both sides of it.
Yeah, it is great, especially when it's somebody who comes from a similar background, somebody who you can see your journey and their journey. It's really important to be able to share those successes, those lessons, and as you mentioned before, those mistakes as well.
Yeah.
Not only the lessons learned from them, but just to kind of reassure people that they're not the only ones making mistakes. People that have had massive successes have made mistakes as well and learned from them, and they've contributed to the success that have come since then. So thank you very much for sharing that, and thank everybody, and thank you to everyone who has been watching / listening. You can get our review of Into Deep from cameolaunch.com right now, and keep your eyes and ears open for any news we put out of future screenings, and keep your eyes and ears open for our next reviews and interviews with other great filmmakers as well. If you want to stay up to date with anything that Chris and all the guys at Slick Films are doing, we've got links to all their social media in the description. If you want to keep up to date with our next reviews and interviews, you can stay up to date with us on socials. That's at Cameo Launch on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. So thank you once again, Chris, for doing this with us. It's been a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for your time, and well done once again for such a fantastic film.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks so much for having me on, Nigel.
And all of you out there, you all take care, stay safe, and we will see you next time.